This week, religious leaders and celebrities brought to literal tears by President Trump's immigration policies, and our panel reacts. It's National School Choice Week. Is the Supreme Court about to give the movement its biggest win yet? And who's asking her fans to forgive her for singing at inaugural events last week in Washington? All these stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris DeGaulle, and now let's meet our panel. Some of the gentlemen behind the stories at readlion.com this week. Josh Mann, our managing editor, Michael Ryan, executive editor, and Adam Wittenberg is deputy editor at The Lion. Gentlemen, I welcome you in as we kind of can't avoid what is mostly all of the oxygen being sucked out of the room, and that is the confirmation hearings of various Trump nominees. As we talk here and put this show to bed, RFK Jr. is being grilled by several senators on Capitol Hill for HHS Secretary. I just thought I'd get your thoughts off the top and go around the horn, Adam, on RFK Jr. I wouldn't say it's exclusively Democrats that seem to oppose him. Maybe there's some Republicans that are skeptical too, but how do you read this one?
Well, it is very interesting because one of the things RFK has in common with Donald Trump is that he doesn't have to be doing this. They're both independently wealthy. RFK Jr. is famous and all these things, but I think he really does believe in what he's doing. And when you ask about kind of the way it's falling on party lines, a lot of people don't know, but traditionally the Democrats have billed themselves as the party of the common man, the working person, the working people, middle, lower class Americans. But really, look at their funding sources. It's heavily corporate. A lot of these mega companies and mega donors are lining up behind them and have for decades now. And if you look into that, it might look at sort of who's pulling the strings on some of these senators. You know,
Michael, his testimony about his own heroin addiction, he brought that up. I mean, he is not hiding the fact that he had struggles over the years with substance abuse and other things, and that his behavior was not always sterling. He's fallen, like all of us. And it's interesting to see, for instance, his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, this week come out with this video saying that he's a predator and how rotten to the core he is. Tough for anybody to watch someone's family turn on them like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, this is really a test of how populist the country is now, maybe even more so than the election of Donald Trump. Because what this fellow is wanting to do is try to make America healthy again. And what he has promised is a look at vaccines and their efficacy. And post-COVID vaccines, I think that's an interesting question to ask. But it's going to be a great test to see just how populist the country is because he's got so many establishment forces allied against his confirmation.
Yeah, Josh, science, medicine, I thought these are things that you questioned, you challenge, you test until there is no question anymore. It's really not a partisan thing, is it?
Yeah, I think you're right. And he has pushed back so far in the hearing on this alleged anti-vaccine stance. But he is willing to question vaccines and big pharma and some of these things. And I think post-COVID, I think Americans are welcoming that. You know, it was actually largely on the right and some people who were skeptical about what they were being told by public health officials who were demanding the government start following the science, which is sort of ironic when you think about it.
And in fact, Michael, to that point on COVID, I guess it took Trump's election for the CIA to now come forward and say, oh, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, COVID was something that was created in a lab by China.
Yeah, it was interesting. In the first week of the Trump administration, the new Trump administration, the CIA assessment of COVID's origins was released, and it is likely from the lab in Wuhan, China. And this was probably the assessment from several years ago. And I recalled that these kinds of records were required to be released by the COVID-19 Origins Act of 2023. By the summer of 2023, the Biden administration was required by law to release everything it knows about the origins of COVID, and it didn't seem to happen. I'm wondering why. Why no transparency whatsoever? In effect, they're just shielding the Communist Chinese Party. at about the same time that they were required to release these records, independent journalists Schellenberger and Taibbi were reporting on the first 3 people who had COVID. Guess what? Scientists at the Wuhan lab. Now, does the media know more than the government about the origins of COVID? I doubt it. We need to come clean.
And Adam, this brings us back a little bit to the RFK discussion in that, if if there were things about COVID that maybe government knew that we weren't told and now we know, how can you as an American not question what else government might not be telling you about the science or the medicine that they say is certain?
Yeah, great point, Chris, and Michael and Josh as well, that we have to look at who's controlling the media. And again, these corporate interests. If you're in major media, if you're consuming news from even major networks, they have to get advertisers. They have to get dollars. Big food, big pharma, big corporations are funding the news. And they're not going to be the ones to put those companies that are paying their bills in a bad light. And too often as well, those companies are funding the government, and we're seeing a lot of people get away with things. Michael mentioned a law had been passed that the government was supposed to release what it knows about the origins of COVID by that date. And my thought is, no wonder the media, or not surprising, the media did not even hold them accountable to that, because the media is very invested in keeping the storyline going and propping up these drug makers and vaccine makers and all these things.
In fact, Josh, I'll jump in on what the Trump administration has announced this week, too. Caroline Leavitt, his new press secretary, had a fantastic press briefing. We'll get into some of the sound of that a little later in the show. But they've announced that they're reinstating some 440 different press passes that were revoked by the Biden administration. And they've also announced they're going to allow new media in. And I think you as a journalist, I'd just ask you, again, it kind of dovetails with this discussion on medicine, science, vaccines, and whatnot. Is this the key? Is this the way forward? More journalism, more voices, more questions being asked. That's how a public can start to feel confident again that we're getting the full facts and that we can trust our government again.
Yes. More speech, not less. And I welcome the Trump administration's welcome of alternative media, journalists, podcasters. They reinstated 440 press passes that were revoked by the Biden administration. One of our own colleagues who works for the Daily Caller was called upon for the first time in more than a year, a White House correspondent, Reagan Reese of the Daily Caller. We see that this is what the White House press secretary started with in her press conference to remind folks in the media that they are, what she said, the most transparent and accessible president in American history. That's how she characterized her boss, Donald Trump.
You've seen, Michael, the media this week try to cover the border crackdown as well as the rounding up of various immigrants, particularly those linked to things like Tren de Aragua. We'll have some more sound on this a little later. Media trying to portray this as, picking on people who clean hotel rooms and pick our crops and tearing children apart and attacking children and weeping and crying. That's not what Tom Homan, who's the border czar, is saying about it. That's not what Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, is saying about it. But it's interesting to watch the media work in covering this, even though it's something Donald Trump, really one of the biggest reasons he won the election again.
Absolutely. The media are trying to very quickly in this process play up the fear angle that people are fearful of what's going on. But there was one episode, a video of a guy standing out on his porch in the Bronx talking to the media about a raid in his building, and he was delighted. He said the illegals there were, destroying the apartment, making things a little unseemly in the building, that there had been some break-ins in the building. He was absolutely delighted. And then also the media are jumping on the costs of these repatriation flights and the roundup of criminal illegal immigrants, as opposed to, say, the cost of bringing them in. The Biden administration actually flew them in, as opposed to the cost of the housing and the feeding, the transportation of those who are here. They never ask those questions, and they never really show much interest in the Laken Rileys of the world who were victims of the criminal illegals.
It's interesting to hear specifically to the case of Colombia, where the Trump administration tried to send a number of more violent criminals back to Colombia, and the Colombian president initially said no. Trump then responded, Josh, by saying, well, we'll start to tariff the heck out of all of the goods that come into the country. And I heard people actually say, some, I guess, who opposed Trump, that, oh, no, whatever will we do? So many of our fresh flowers come from Colombia. So much of our coffee comes from Colombia. Do you think Americans were threatened about more expensive flowers and coffee as a reason to pull back on deporting violent illegal aliens?
Well, luckily we don't have that problem, since Colombia did say, okay, fine, we'll take these flights and our citizens who shouldn't be in your country. But it is, I think, a signal that those who are opposed to Donald Trump will continue to find ways to oppose these policies, even though I think a lot of Americans, a majority of Americans, believe and see that these people have come illegally, and that it's costing us a lot of money, and especially those who are causing or committing crimes should be removed from the country. We want to be a country of law and order, and I think most Americans agree with that.
I'd like to go around the horn. Adam, I'll start with you. It's School Choice Week, which is an important one to those of us here at the Lion and the Herzog Foundation, our parent organization. So I just ask for your thoughts on this School Choice Week.
Well, it's super exciting. The school choice bus has left the station and is off and running, and it's doing great. There are now upwards of 80 school choice programs, I think something like 33 states, and well over 1 million participants. It's here to stay, it's growing, and it's coming soon to a state or area near you.
Michael, the state of school choice this School Choice Week.
Well, it's exploding, and it should be. Adam did a piece on a family in Arkansas who was looking for a rescue plan and couldn't afford one themselves, and found it through the Arkansas school choice program. I mean, these are the stories that need to be told. People need to understand this is not about government bureaucracy. This isn't about religion. This isn't about anything else other than families being able to educate their children in the way they would like to do so, and in some cases the way they have to, and being empowered to do so. That's just absolutely as American as it gets.
Gentlemen, thank you. When we return to the Lion Week in Review, we'll wade through some of the sound from the week, cable news and on Capitol Hill, as the Lion Week in Review rolls on next. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. If you missed any of today's show, or you're interested in more great news and stories that you've been hearing today, or any day of the week, you can regularly check out the Lion at readlion.com. Panel, let's jump into some of the sounds this week. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Michael, we'll start there. Their official spokesman on CBS explaining the church's position on the Trump administration's deportation plans for illegal migrants. Take a look.
Is the Catholic Church in the United States taking a formal position on President Trump's immigration policies in recent days?
We are. We think we have to speak to many of these policies, which we see as going against some of the basic tenets of our faith, frankly. The fundamental right of every human person that need to be respected, no matter their origin, no matter their situation.
If I heard this once, I heard it 1,000 times, Michael. Jesus was a refugee. I hear a lot of people of faith in clerical collars this week saying the Trump administration's deportation plans are cruel and not in keeping with the Christian tradition. So you say?
Well, and a lot of people have argued back that Jesus and his family obeyed the laws. A lot of people of faith themselves will disagree with this pope on this particular matter, as I think other popes might have. I think the question is what is the definition of compassion? And we can disagree on that. I don't think it's compassionate to have a system of illegal immigration, and it is a system. The cartels are running it, where people are dying, women are getting raped, children are being sold into sex and work slavery. I just don't think that's compassionate. And I think I encourage people of faith, including the Pope, to look at the cartels and what they're doing and whether that's compassionate.
Josh, man, I'd get your reaction to actress, singer Selena Gomez on social media making the rounds this week in tears over the same policy.
Just just want to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked. The children. I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
So, Josh, the
So
children getting
sorry.
attacked.
I wish I could do
She's obviously very emotional. I don't know what she speaks of when she says the children getting attacked, but your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of honestly makes me feel sad when I see people who are sad. I think one interesting question is, why do people film themselves in such an emotional state? And clearly she wants attention for this, even if she sincerely believes these things. But I also wonder, what is she talking about? Are we talking about deportations of illegal immigrants who have additional criminal records besides the fact that they're here illegally? Is she defending those folks? Is she sad that those folks are meeting justice? I think there's something else going on, and I think it might be a narrative that she's hearing, maybe some misinformation that isn't part of the key issue about deporting people here illegally with criminal records.
Tom Homan, the president's border czar, remains committed and unmoved by the opposition, however. Watch.
I want to go back to those military flights going south. As you said, we have never seen that before. Is that going to be a constant commitment from the U.S. military every single day to take deportees out?
Yes.
So is this what we will see every single day, ending in what the president has promised is millions and millions being deported?
Yes. But you're going to see the numbers steadily increase, the number of arrests nationwide, as we open up the aperture. Right now it's concentrating public safety threats, national security threats. That's a smaller population. So we're going to do this on priority base, as President Trump's promised, but as that aperture opens, there'll be more arrests nationwide.
Adam, Tom Homan has been shown crying celebrities and bishops, and he's been approached by media saying, alleging abuse and bruises on arms, and Tom Homan not budging an inch from his mission.
Yeah, these folks mean business, just like Donald Trump. I actually think it's interesting is that a lot of immigrants are actually getting the memo quicker than average Americans, or certainly the media elite, who just can't believe that the law is being followed, that actions actually have consequences, and that a man and his team are following through on the very clear priorities and commitments that they made. And I think we need to get used to that. And I'm glad Tom isn't budging, and he's not giving in to the bullying that all the, oh, you did this wrong. I saw one interview where they're like, you didn't give them water on the flights back. And he's like, I don't believe that. We have the highest standards in the world in how we treat detainees and even deportees.
We mentioned her earlier in the show. Caroline Leavitt is the new White House press secretary. She showed up at the first briefing this week without a binder, without a note, and stood before the American press. And here's a little bit of it.
This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment. So it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House.
Of course, we'll be working here at the Lion to get access to the White House ourselves. I can bet you we'll probably find ourselves in the briefing room one of these days. But, Michael, we were talking a little about this a while ago. She also, throughout this press briefing was asked by different members of the media, will you pledge to tell the truth? And I don't remember seeing a briefing room this packed and pressing a press secretary this hard in the last 4 years.
Yeah, she pledged to tell the truth, and the headline might have been Trump policy reverses Biden policy. I'm not a scuba diver, Chris, but I feel like I've got the psychological equivalent of the Benz, because we went from almost no access to the president to total access to the president. It's just an amazing feeling, and I don't think the Benz has ever felt better.
Josh, the question that was asked of her at one point was, and I've heard this similarly on the immigration front, they said, are you confident that everyone that's being sent back to their home country is a criminal? To which she responded, yeah, around these parts, I know the previous administration didn't, but we believe everybody that broke into the country is a criminal. That's that. There's not this designation of criminality on top of criminality in this White House.
Yeah, she was asked multiple times. I mean, it was like a follow-up. How many of these illegal immigrants are criminals? All of them. And she said it again. She said they are here illegally, and that's the position of the Trump administration, clearly Tom Homan. And so I think though that even the left legacy media should welcome such unfettered access to the president.
You know, it is not that uncommon that press secretaries bring binders with them. You know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders did, Kayleigh McEnany did, Adam. So it's not to suggest that she's going to walk up there every single press briefing without reference, but it's pretty impressive that she was able to pull this one off for nearly an hour without a single note.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to look forward to. Caroline Leavitt is, I believe, the youngest press secretary in history. I think she's in her late 20s. And it is that refreshing feeling of we're here to tell the truth. We're here to say what we really believe. And that's the difference between Trump and a normal politician. He's not an established politician. He's a businessman. He's up front. He says what he thinks. It sometimes gets him in trouble. He was known for mean tweets and maybe not being the most sensitive, in some ways, person. But he's trying to be honest. He says what he thinks and he does what he says. And that is very refreshing.
We talked earlier in the show about RFK Jr. and his confirmation hearings. His wife, a famous actress, most recently with Curb Your Enthusiasm, the Larry David Show. So I assume they have celebrity friends, and maybe that's why singer Jewel showed up at their Make America Healthy Again ball on inauguration night. She sang. She has since, Jewel, published a video on her social media account apologizing for her participation. Gentlemen, take a listen.
And I am so sorry that I caused pain, especially in my LGBTQIA plus community, because you guys are treasures. You make the world a better place. You've made my life a better place.
Yeah, Michael, I don't. She's sorry. She went to Washington. She sang at this ball. Now she's sorry she caused so much pain. You say?
Well, I'm not sure what kind of pain she caused, but. It seems to me that these kinds of apologies are probably on the way out. I think one of the things that Trump supporters enjoy the most about Trump is that he's unapologetic, and he gives his supporters permission to be unapologetic about their strongly held beliefs and their strongly held feelings and actions about what they believe. I just think it's, it gives the whole country now permission to have maybe politically incorrect opinions on gender, on DEI, and other topics.
By the way, Josh, not for nothing, the new acting, well, I guess not acting, he is, the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, is gay. It should be noted. That was Trump's pick.
Yeah, I mean, the left likes to make conservatives out to all be one kind of conservative, but that's not true. And Trump clearly has been and held socially liberal policies of various kinds, including acceptance of LGBTQ people. So has Elon Musk, by the way, in his employment practices. I think this idea of apologizing, this guilt by association sort of idea is behind some of this. And I think Michael's right, and I hope that he's right, that we're starting to see this kind of fade away, that people are realizing, look, just because you go and perform at someone's party doesn't mean that you agree 100% with all of their policies. Can't we be Americans? I think we once were like this, where we have convictions and we just get along.
And Adam, final thought. I mean, I was in attendance at the Liberty Ball. Jason Aldean, very well-known, famous country singer, he unabashedly showed up, played the concert, and said he celebrates Trump. So he wasn't afraid, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually saw a report that Snoop Dogg played, and he got a lot of pushback. But he's like, hey, guys, I'm still black. I'm this, but, I want to play at this event. I want to, be part of it. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Josh and Michael said as well. Like, let's get back to being Americans, where just going to someone's event or singing your song or performing doesn't mean that you're endorsing every single thing. And a lot of those things are also fear-mongering, like we've said, and labeling, which need to go on the way out, too.
Gentlemen, thank you. When we get back on the Lion Week in Review, our panel picks their favorite story of the week. You don't want to miss that. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. We like to wrap up every show by asking the panel their particular favorite story, one that they would call your attention to specifically at readlion.com. Adam, we start with you this week.
Well, it's been a great week, and if you haven't been following Lion coverage, I would highly recommend go check at readlion.com. I really can't pick just one, but we've done outstanding coverage of School Choice Week, and we're continuing to. And so go and read some stories, individual families that have been touched by it, laws and policies, and even some overarching why school choice, why it's good, or some of the, not numbers, but it's not boring or anything. So School Choice for sure.
Josh Mann.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our coverage of the March for Life. And so we actually had some ambassadors from the Herzog Foundation there, and we've got some reporting on that. And J.D. Vance spoke there, and I would summarize his policy suggestion to the pro-life movement that it's not just pro-life, but pro-family. And so I think America needs that again. I think secularism has sort of pushed out some of the pro-family cultural convictions that we once had, but I think those things are coming back.
By the way, it is important to mention that I believe Donald Trump, if I'm not mistaken, Josh, Donald Trump was the first president to speak in person at a pro-life event like this.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah. And Michael, your favorite story of the week?
Well, we've talked about it. The fact that the Trump administration has restored 440 press passes to people that were denied by the Biden administration. Now, also, alternative media sources are being included. It gives conservative, independent media a chance to question our elected leader, and that's just terrific for America.
I'd ask you really quickly, too, if I could. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What do you think, as people go to readlion.com, what can they look for in coming weeks that maybe you're working on that people don't know? A little preview. Josh, anything in particular?
Well, state legislatures all around the country have a lot of school choice legislation and other related legislation on that they're considering in committees. And so be watching for some of that progress. We'll be reporting on that. And, of course, continuing to watch the Trump administration closely. It looks like that activity is not going to slow down anytime soon.
Good stuff. And, of course, the Supreme Court is taking up a case right now as we speak on religious charter schools. That's going to be one not to miss, and one that you will see covered deeply and exclusively at readlion.com. So that'll do it for us this week. Be sure to keep to date on all the latest news by going to readlion.com. Bookmark it so you never miss it. And if you missed any of today's show, as always, you can check it out on YouTube. So for all of us at The Lion, thanks a lot for being a part of today's show, and we'll catch you next week right here.